Welcome to Iron and Ceremony, Librarius Omnis, where we explore the depths of the Black Library.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of Iron and Ceramite's Librarius Omnis. My name is John, and as always on these, I am joined by Shane. Hello mate, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Oh, always a pleasure, mate. Thank you for sticking with me. Right, so this is part one of Mechanicum. Are you looking forward to getting into this one?
I am. So with the people that have followed along, will know that for a lot of these books, earlier books, we've kind of already read them once, and this is probably the second go through. And whenever, as I said, it's the same again. Whenever I go through them again, I find bits and pieces that I missed the first time round.
Yeah.
So I always enjoy them. And this has started the same way. I remember the first time round thinking it's it was quite intense. And there's a lot to take in, and it's in a very different style to what's come before. But actually, having read it once and this being the second time through, I found it easier to kind of take on. And so there was a lot more that I enjoyed about it this time round than the first time round. And I'm looking forward to reading the rest of it, because obviously we've just started, so I've just covered the first sort of 4 chapters and the intro for this. But
pretty much.
I particularly like the discussion or the introduction of the knights. That the knight households at the moment are the bits that's holding my attention the most. I know that's going to change as we go through the story, but it was nice to read about them again.
I mean, I read this in January, my first time round. And like I've said 100 times, I haven't gone further than this book. So It's been, in January, I'd probably been into Warhammer for about 3 or 4 months by then. So when the first time I read it, I don't think any of this made sense to me. I was just like, what are they talking about? A lot of it was just like going straight over my head. And then now it's obviously like 10 months later. And I've, like I say, we read the first few chapters, and it actually made sense this time. So I've enjoyed this second run through a lot more. And sort of all the weird Mechanicum isms that they have on Mars, like they're actually now you know what's going on. It's actually a little bit funny as well, just how weird they are. And then we'll get into it, but there's like some of them you think, so the first time I was like, right, they're just sort of robots, they're intelligent but mindless robots. But then actually reading it, even like the more robotic people got good personalities as well. We'll get to him, Romu 31. I think he's pretty funny, especially later on as well. So as part of that little group, he becomes more than he is. But you're right. There is a bit to it, and I suppose that's why I get drawn to the knight households first, is because they're less robotic. Yeah, definitely. Still weird in that, they're effectively controlling these massive war machines. But the way that they're talked about, and the way that they're sort of discussed, and the way that their structure is very much like knights of old. And it's like, these big war machines are effectively their kind of their horses, their chargers. And so it's a really interesting, that kind of analogy, comparing one to the other. And then you've got the Mechanicus side of it, where, as you said, incredibly robotic, but at the same time you miss, on the first read I think you miss a lot, and the second read you're like, oh, okay, a lot of this makes more sense now. You almost see more of their humanity. Definitely. And then I'm sure, as we have done for the last 8 books or so, we will go into quite a bit of detail, and I'm sure you'll help me make sense of things as well. This one could be a 6-parter. Definitely. I'm putting that. Whereas before I've always gone and underestimated the amount of time we're going to take, I'm going long for this one. I'm saying this is Mechanicum's a 6-parter. That's my prediction. Like Horus Rising. 1-parter, definitely. Right, so we've got our PowerPoint. If you're listening obviously, you want to watch on YouTube. We've got the PowerPoint up that we always have, where we always have little helps, visual helps. And the first one for this is actually a map, map of Mars, or the fastest quadrangle of Mars, which is pretty much where the majority of this story is going to be told. The different provinces and
bit of a contested sector.
Yeah, bit like all the different factions and houses where they're set up. We might refer back to this. It's handy just to sort of know the distances or where everyone lives in relation to when they're talking about so and so. A little bit helpful. I don't know if you've obviously, because you've audiobook this, haven't you? So I don't know if you get any sort of thing with that.
You don't get this sort of additional detail that you get at the front, so it's quite interesting to see this. I think what I like is like the way that they describe Mars is so ordinary, given that right now, like where we are, no one's ever set foot on it, right? There are, we know Olympus Mons is the mountain on Mars because that's been named already.
Yeah.
But it's the way that they describe, those things that makes it relatable, and you realise that this has been a settled planet for thousands of years. It's just very different to what it's not. I don't know if you've ever seen Total Recall, the original one.
Yeah.
Arnie, of course, and obviously their vision of Mars. It's the same principle in a way. It makes it relatable, but is also entirely different to what we can expect, and it's like it makes it seem really run of the mill, like people just wander around Mars. But it's still a very, very different. So like even things like the Magma City, and it's like it's on this what's it called, a derelict volcano that wasn't active, and then they made active again to help power the forge. And it's amazing, really. And then where the knights, so you've got the Night House Tyrannus, and what's the other? It's Night House Tyrannus and Night House, the ones that definitely sound like bad guys. Mortis.
Mortis, that's the one.
Yeah, Latin for death. You know where they're going.
They're the good guys. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Said truly as a chaos player. But they're obviously the two that kind of are often facing off against each other in like rivalries around, or like site rivalries around Mars. And it's quite interesting the way we'll get into it, but it's quite interesting early on the way they describe it, that these like little territorial disputes, they're really, it's handbags, right? It's not real, but they need it to make sure that the warriors and the knight households are kept sharp and are able to let out their energies and make sure that they're able to when war comes, that they're trained and ready to go. And it's quite interesting that it's those bits that are they're very, when you think about it, they're very minimal in the size of the global conflict, but it's just interesting that it exists at all, that they've decided that actually you need some level of conflict to get stuff done, whereas we'd be like, no, why are you fighting each other? There's no need. But here it's like war is a way of life, so that these knight households can continue to stay sharp.
And we'll say it 100 times, we'll get into it, but although they've evolved beyond, many of them beyond like needing like flesh, it all evolves to money and who's being paid to output the most sort of machinery or tech or whatever, and they're all squabbling over the scraps and who's going to come and invest in their forge and bits and pieces like that. So although they're a lot of them, I guess, see themselves above humanity, like they're not much better, and they definitely fall victim to everybody else in this heresy era.
Yeah, it's still just a resource game at the end of the day.
Right. So obviously we'll have our dramatis personae to go along with us all the way through. And yeah, because I can never remember anybody's names or who they are or what they do.
These ones as well. There's some pronunciations in this one that will, the audio book helps cheat my way through.
Yeah, so enjoy enjoy this. This is going to be disastrous.
I'm looking forward to it.
I can't even pronounce normal names, for God's sake. Right. Anyway, that aside, let's finally get into it and start on chapter 0.01. So it's a bit of a lie. We're not actually getting into it. We're jumping back before the heresy, back before Mars was Mars as we know it. And this is taking place, what, thousands of years previous to where we are?
So this would have been after, when would it have been? So it would have been after the Age of Strife, when humanity, or just after the Age of Strife and Dark Knight and stuff like that, because humanity was separated. Earth had descended into a techno-barbarian state.
Yep.
And it was the end of the War of Unification.
Sure. Right. Okie dokie. So you know where we are? Let's go. We're on Mars finally, and we're going to start with a character called Brother Verticora. He is the rider of the Ares Lictor, which is a Paladin class knight. You obviously have the interest. Tell us, what is a Paladin class knight, Shane?
So a Paladin, well, back in so a Paladin is a so traditionally a Paladin class of knight would have been a knight that is both obviously a warrior, but also healer / devout. So a warrior monk, effectively, is what the old Paladins were. And anyone that's played D&D or any other role-playing game or things like that will know that's where the Paladin comes from. So they're kind of a religious knight, and that is no different in the world of 40k. It extends to that. So they're just very devout knightly classes.
Yeah, and thank you.
Did I get that right? Is that the answer you were looking for?
Yeah, I guess so. Why not? So he's basically riding a 9-meter tall humanoid war machine that he's sort of riding around in. If you played the game, you know what I'm talking about. And he is being flanked by 2 more of his brothers and the Knights of Tyrannus, which is the house they belong to. They're heading up the side of the Olympus Mons, and they're doing it fairly easily. However, the Ares Lictor has a slight mechanical issue on one of his legs, so he's walking with a bit of a limp. And unusually, nobody on Mars seems to be able to fix this. It just seems to be a bit of a character flaw for this particular knight.
Yep.
And the other unusual thing, that it is raining for the first time in his living memory. Although it's quite gentle, there's a ferocious thunderstorm happening above them. And behind these 3 knights is a crowd of thousands of people following up the mountain, but they're way back in the distance. And so the knights reach a natural gap in the cliffs, and the rain gets heavier, and they have to start heading down into the volcano, down a long trail, which is usually quite mundane and easy, but the rain's making it quite treacherous, and with his gammy knee, Verticora almost slips as he's distracted by a golden light filling the sky above, and a gigantic golden city busts through the clouds, descending into a volcano. You might have seen this city before if you were paying attention in Descent of Angels. So it lands down in the volcano, and the knights continue their way down. And then as the smoke and mist settles, they're sort of standing just shocked by the size, scale, detail, and just how sort of beautiful this thing is, and can't understand how anyone's had the time or been able to make something so perfect on the outside to send it through space. But he only gets sort of a couple of seconds to take this all in, because a giant doorway opens, exposing a blinding light. And and feeling suddenly that he's in a presence of a being far greater and more terrifying than he's ever been able to imagine. And suddenly this figure emerged in light and clearly in warrior armor, as well designed as the ship itself, ascends and walks down towards the knights, completely stunning them. As he approaches, this man says, "Your machine is damaged, Taemon Verticorda," and reaches out towards him and touches the knee joint where it's been causing him an issue. And this man says, "Machine, heal thyself." And Verticorda feels power and warmth go through his body and steps back immediately, sensing that the knee joint is repaired. And he asks who this man is. And the reply is, "I am the Emperor." And he knows that that's true. And he drops to one knee and says, "Welcome to Mars, my lord."
Quick note on this.
Yeah.
I was like, I think it was the last book. It might have been the last one we did, where there was the quote at one point, where it's like, if it bleeds, we can kill it. And that was obviously from Predator. This one, "Machine, heal thyself," is a semi-quote of Jesus, of all people. In the Bible, he says, physician, as in doctor.
Yeah.
Physician, heal thyself. So obviously that's put in there as an anecdote, as a point of callback. It's been called out before. The Emperor, is he a god? Is he not?
Yeah.
What's the religious iconography like? And this is very much a tongue-in-cheek jab for those that get the reference to say, well, this is the Emperor. What is he? So just a bit of deep lore there for you. As I said, I noticed it and was like, hang on, that's an interesting quote, and that's where it's from.
Has Jesus returned with a warrior's spirit this time, has he?
Indeed.
He didn't like it the first time round.
No, he's taking names and kicking ass.
Good one. As I mentioned, when he touched the knee, not only did the machine heal, but Verticorda felt the power go through his body as well, because these guys are connected to their knights. Like they sort of when they're riding it, I can't remember how it is. I guess it's like a plug socket in their head that basically plugs in, and they're connected, so they actually feel these machines as if it's their own skin, and it goes down from these knights even to when we get to the big titans as well, which we touched on before in the earlier books when the guys are hooking themselves up to the titan.
Yeah.
So yeah, his gammy knee is obviously his gammy knee, and when it's healed, his knee is healed as well. And when we'll touch on it as we go through the book, but when these machines are getting damaged, the people riding them or piloting them feel the pain as well.
Yeah.
But so the Emperor's arrived, and with one little axe, he's basically been welcomed to Mars, and the future's been set as we know it. And we're going to jump now into the main portion of the book, into part 1, Principia Mechanicum, and chapter 101.
I do like the way that they do the chapters in this one.
Yeah,
it's
simple.
very Mechanicum.
Yeah, a lot easier than last time as well. 3 different titles each time. It's just very binary.
Indeed, absolutely.
So, as with many of the books, we normally follow a human around these alien worlds, and that's what we're going to do here with Dahlia Cytheria, or Cythera.
Cytheria. Cythera.
We'll do that. So she is a transcriber from the Librarium Technologica. She had been removed from her workplace a week earlier and locked in a cell until suddenly 6 protectors arrived, confirmed her name, and took her away. She'd been locked away in darkness as punishment for making enhancements to her conjugator, or I guess that's a computer to you and I.
Yep.
And the Magos in charge of her dragged her to the cell in a furious rage. the protectors arrived, and even though the Magos protested, they took her away from her current life, which had been lost amongst thousands of other scribes and menial workers just doing a job. Although she actually enjoyed what she was doing, looking through reports sent back from across the galaxy from fleets of the Great Crusades, and uncovering lost knowledge of Terra's past. So many people, it's just filling in boxes and filing paperwork, but she was actually learning as she was going and enjoying it. Without speaking, they walk her out of the librarium through the streets of the Imperial Palace to a starship waiting on a landing pad for them. So once inside, the protectors, they lock their feet into these holes in the floor and left her to fend for herself as they launched into space. She's thrown to her knees and sort of flung around a little bit and has to cling on for dear life. And with that, for the first time ever, she was in space. She had no idea where she was going or why the Mechanicum had taken her. And then other than telling her to eat, they basically just stood still silently for the first day of travel. So the protectors, they're described as being tall and powerfully built, gene-bulked and augmented with implants and weaponry, wearing red robes and have sort of all manner of wires and cables running around and through their bodies. So I imagine that's what's on the cover of this book, the protector. Does they look fairly similar?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah.
So she notices they smell unpleasantly of rotten meat, oil and sweat, each armed with a large pistol and tall iron staves with bronze and silver cogs at the top, with parchments of paper hanging from it, and each bit of paper has a 4x4 grid of numbers that she noticed that each way she looked in the grid, the total was always 34. Recognizing the meaning, she said the melancholia aloud. One of the protectors spoke and asked her what she said. She repeated it and said that she'd seen this in a book about 2 years ago, and she can actually remember anything that she reads. And so he tells her this is the symbol of their master, and then she tells him the history of where the symbol is originally from. And as she's sort of talking, she goes into a bit of a robo mode herself. Her eyes glaze over, and she just sort of spews the information out until she catches these guys looking at her and stops herself from talking. And with that, one of them unlocks himself from its stand, faces her and says, "Now we know why we were sent to get you." And tell her that the Magos has actually sentenced her to be executed for meddling with technology, which was sent from the Omnisire, and it is against the law to alter such machinery. And the protector says, "Now, do you see why our master sent Romu 31 to get you?" And Dahlia questions the name, and he says it's their designation. They all share it. They are all the same. And their master is High Adept Coriel Zeph, the mistress of the Magma City, and that is where they will be going. And with that, light cracks across a giant panel on the front of the ship as it becomes translucent, exposing the surface of Mars below them, and a bright red surface under clouds of smog and factorums as far as the eye can see. This is Mars, the domain of the Mechanicum. So that's our first sort of introduction to our main character throughout the book. And as we mentioned before, Romu 31 comes to save the day. Pretty much. She was obviously on Earth in the Imperial Palace, so she was doing the Emperor's work, not just a nobody. And now she's.
Was it the Imperial Palace?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Or let's go back.
It's fine.
Rewind.
I can never remember.
She got when they took her through the streets of the Imperial Palace.
Oh, okay, fine. Oh, of course, and the Imperial Palace is not. Yeah, for those that wouldn't know, it's like a country.
Yeah.
When we say Imperial Palace, it's not a building; it's like a country itself. Quite an interesting introduction because although we learn a little bit, we don't learn a lot.
No.
So. And I suppose the other thing is this is also another one where we're not talking about Space Marines in any way.
No.
There's no Space Marine sort of antagonist. There's nothing happening in that regard. We are very much in a human story, and I say that in sort of inverted commas because, like, or speech marks, because it is a human story, but it's also not a human story because of the way the Adeptus Mechanicus actually are themselves. But we'll get more into that as it comes. But it's interesting that she didn't even know, like, she's been mucking around with things. She's updated her cogitator and various other bits and pieces, and you know, she's because of it, she's been sentenced to death. And she didn't even know that's what was happening. And it just so happens the intervention of, at the moment, this mistress is the only thing that saved her.
Yeah, it's got a holiday to Mars, though. I'm sure everyone wants to try it out.
Yeah, indeed, the red planet. You know, it's terraformed now. You can go up there. It's all good.
Yeah. I don't know if you'd want to, though. I reckon it would be pretty miserable.
There's not much else going on Mars, really, is there? Like, it's a red planet. There's lots of sand. There's a couple of mountains and a lot of forges.
Yeah,
like it's never going to be a tropical paradise, and they definitely haven't played up to it at the moment.
Take me to Lorraine. That sounds like a much nicer planet. Well, it was for a bit.
I was going to say, I think they mention Lara.
They do in a minute, yeah.
In a bit, anyway.
That's what made me think of it.
So, okay, fair enough.
Yeah. Anyway, so she's on her first holiday, and meanwhile, the 3 knights, which belong to House Tyrannus, are on the hunt. Maven, who rides the Equitus Bellum, Cronus riding Pax Mortis, and Old Stator in the Fortis Metallum, one of the two.
Yeah.
So these guys are veterans. They've shared glory of loads of battles, and thanks to their work and many others, House Tyrannus is now one of the most respected in Martian history.
Yeah.
Maven, I think he's the younger of the guys. He's sort of complaining about this mission they're currently on, which has them out in the middle of nowhere by a factorum culling feral servitors out by a refinery. And he's bitter that they've been left on Mars. He wanted to go and fight in the Great Crusade, but Old Stator tells him that the War Master doesn't want knights. He wants god machines, and they need to remain behind to protect Mars and its traditions. And that means fulfilling their duties, even if they can be menial tasks at times. So Stator's in charge of this squad, and he tells them off and sends them to continue hunting for this swarms of feral servitors. And basically these are ones who have either become too damaged or the surgeries on their brains didn't take, and instead of just destroying them for whatever reason, they get dumped into the wasteland. Most trying to continue with their programming, but others regain some sort of cognitive ability, eat dead servitors, and other sort of form mindless zombie looking packs breaking into facilities, killing workers and smashing the place up. Hence why these knights are sent out to act as pest control, which, why they have not just incinerated on site, I don't understand.
Yeah, this is pretty mad. When I first read this and was like, what? Hang on, what? Like, this is what happens. Like,
yeah,
this was a bit of a strange one. So there's these, because the other thing is like, obviously servitors, it's not always going to go well, but like, the people that end up becoming servitors are not normally the cream of the crop anyway.
No.
And if it doesn't work for them, you're just sending these nutcases out like half cooked.
Yeah.
They just end up eating each other. So they're these mad robot cannibals.
Yeah.
It's
and they've probably been given some sort of tool upgrade on their arms, like a saw or something to go around chopping up.
Yeah, and they're just the weird thing, the way it describes it, is a lot of them are doing like what they're programmed for, but they can't quite do it. So it's a bit, it's a bit like a mad Roomba. Like it's trying a Hoover, but it just can't do it.
It's spitting it out the backside.
Yeah, it's still taking up like juice, which is why they have to go out and kill them, because they're still spiking the old lecky bills.
Yeah.
So it's a very, like, you think about it, and you're like, I mean, in the world of 40k, of course, this is how it's done.
Oh yeah,
very
yeah.
grim dark. But yeah, you have to go out and just coal the servitors because we created too many and not enough of them took, or some of them went bad. It's bonkers, but
Yeah.
fine.
Never heard of recycling, have they?
No, and it's interesting because that it's a job for knights, and they make, I think they make a point of it. They're like you know, it's, they say like, oh, the combat, and then he says, although it's not really combat because
Yeah.
they're just wiping out servitors, but they're not. They make a note, as I said, you said it just there. They're not god machines, so they're not the Titans. They're not what's needed in the Great Crusade, but they're also elevated above like warhounds, which are, you know, they're not quite knights, which is an interesting distinction.
Yeah, and there's another thing. They must have some use to take them on a crusade somewhere.
I would have thought they'd come in handy.
Yeah,
because they're like, okay, yeah, they're not Titans. That's fine. Like, they're not the god machines, but Titans are pretty world ending. Like,
yeah,
surely, you know, they're like our version of a tactical nuke, right? You're not going to deploy them unless something's big enough to do it. Whereas the Knights are slightly smaller. You'd be able to go, right. Although I suppose, because a Knight, you'd be like, wipe that place out without destroying it. Whereas your Titan, you'd be like, just wipe it all out.
Smash it,
you know, the city's going to get destroyed. And maybe, as I said, the nature of the Crusade, they've just got to the point where they're like, no, we don't care anymore. We're just wiping everything out.
Yeah, yeah. It's, well, we know the logic isn't there, is it?
No, indeed.
Let's not question it.
No. Or we could go down a total tangent, and we'll stop.
Yeah. Right. So back on track. This facility in particular belongs to Magos Impulven Maximal, the Forge Master of Mars. Verticorder, now Lord Commander of the Knights of Tyrannus, has promised to secure the facility for him. He's one of the Maximal is one of the most senior magi on Mars, and has ties with many noble houses through ancient pacts and ancient powers, and he also has a lot of sway with many of the Titan legions. So while Maven is patrolling the perimeter, he feels a tremor in the ground and senses something big move in the distance, but trying to work out what it is. Whatever it is, it's either very big or there's a lot of them. So Delia,
he's
sorry,
sent back, isn't he? It's like, is it Catarix sends him back and says, like, you cannot let any servitors get behind us.
Yeah.
And so that's why he's turned around, because that's, but he's like, oh, you know, all right, fine, or I better make sure none of them are there. And then his Auspex starts pinging.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, something's going on here.
Something's coming. Yeah. Not that he's too happy about it. It probably a lot of servitors, but we'll find out very soon. Elsewhere, so Delia and Romu 31, they enter the Martian atmosphere. Looking out through the translucent panel, Delia put my tongue in. Delia states that the panel is not made of glass, and Romu explains it's made of photomalleable steel. And Romu's stave emits certain currents through the panel, allowing light to pass through the metal, allowing us to see through it. A technical invention of Adept Zeph. Looking out and above Mars, Delia can see an unending expanse of orbital docks known as the Ring of Iron, where most of the exploratory fleets are constructed, and is told that they are the largest docks in the galaxy. However, he's disappointed to tell her the shipwrights of Jupiter will lay claim to the largest ship ever constructed once the Furious Abyss is completed.
Indeed.
Oh dear. She points out an empty construction yard, and is told that they're the most recent ships have sent out to the War Master, but he has now diverted them to a new campaign at Istaban. She marvels at the sight of Mars, stating that she'd read about it but never dreamed she would visit. And Romu tells her that the Martian priests do not encourage visitors, as they believe the planet to be sacred, which she finds odd, as that sort of thing isn't allowed. And then obviously they tell her the Emperor agreed that he would not interfere in the traditions of Mars when the treaty to join them and Terra was created. They then arrive at their destination, the Temple of All Knowledge. And we arrive in chapter 2. Anything before we move on?
No, I think it's as I said, it's interesting flavour, right? That we get here, because it's there's various bits that kick in, like the idea of the difference between sacred and the fractious relationship between the Emperor and Mars, which we don't go into the detail yet, but it's hinted at. So that idea that the Emperor needed Mars, so maybe gave them more concessions than he would another planet, especially when Mars was the first stop in the Great Crusade. So I think that's interesting, but really we're still being introduced to the setting. So we've got a view of what's happening with the Knights. We've got a view of what's happening with what's her name?
Talia.
We've got a view of what's happening with her. So I think it's it's setting us up for what's going to come next.
Right. So they are now at the Temple of All Knowledge, which is, like we've mentioned before, built within the large volcano, Arzia Mons. And as they enter, she can feel the overwhelming heat inside. There's an enormous industrial city, structures of black metal built alongside rivers of flowing lava. And she asks, has anyone ever crashed into the lava? And he says, Romu says, sometimes, but it's not to think about it. And this is what I was saying, like, he just cracked, like, straight away, he's like, sometimes, best not to think about it.
I enjoyed this part, because it was just like, of course they have. We're flying into a volcano. What do you think was going to happen?
It's lava.
I did enjoy that part.
They exit out onto a platform and board some sort of transport, but instead of wheels, it has centipede-like legs and a servitor fused into the driving seat. And they move on to meet Adept Zeph. And all I can imagine is the scene where Dorothy arrives in the Emerald City. I just imagine the little song and her getting driven around by a horse of many colours.
Fair. I could see that.
That was just what I couldn't get out of my head, and it just made me laugh reading this. Anyway.
All I saw when it was the servitor that was sort of melded into the seat was I can't remember what they are. They're those AdMech units that Glenn's got. As I just saw them blow me away over and over again.
I'll just try not to think about it.
Yeah, all I was the what are they, breaches, the Catafran breaches.
Right.
It's like, oh my god. But you can just see the AdMech coming through in the descriptions of whatnot. It's like, we don't need a driver. We'll just weld someone in place.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Yeah, man. What did you do for a living? I was a taxi driver.
Yeah.
We've got a job for you, buddy. Come on in. You won't need those legs.
Yeah, let me just get my welder out.
Oh dear. Right, so let's solve a mystery. Maven is about to find out what was making that noise, and a transformer next to him explodes into a burst of flame, and in the distance he can make out the silhouette of the aggressor through the smoke. It's as big as his knight, with a round body and two huge weaponized arms at its side, with something of a tri-cannon on its chest, burning with a white-hot heat. Within seconds of appearing, Maven loses sight of it, but sees waves of protectors charging at him with weapons raised. Going onto a war foot, and he calls out to check that the others are aware. Stater gives the command to engage the enemy. Confused as to why protectors would be attacking such a facility, he obeys. As opposed to Red, these protectors are dressed in grey cloaks, charging and engaging the protectors of Maximal, who are defending the facility. Maven shoots back, turning these guys into puffs of metal and puffs of meat. The protectors have coordinated their attacks and are concentrating fire on the knight, causing his power shields to slowly break under pressure. Two more huge explosions go off nearby. Maven tracks down the enemy war machine facing away from him. As he prepares to attack, the machine spins around and they fire at the same time. Maven hits the other machine, taking one of its arms off, and he in turn is hit and feels the agony of the knight as if he had been hit himself. Able to overcome the pain, he releases a lethal attack, hitting the enemy again, but is horrified to see that he made no impact. Stunned for a moment, which almost gets him killed, until he is able to dodge out of the way and tuck behind the reactor. He shouts out for the others to hurry up and help, but the reactor explodes behind him. So something, like we were saying, a bit of a tribal war going on that these guys are caught up in.
Bit of bad news. That's what this is.
But judging from his reaction, protectors on protectors isn't normal.
No. This is it's definitely not the done thing. This is subnormal. Like if anything, he's trying to work out what's going on, because it's like, this is not what should be happening.
No. Anyway, so back into with Dahlia. She's still enjoying her tour of the city of Mars. So she's fascinated with everything. Every building is essentially a factory of some kind, various shapes and sizes. There are crowds of thousands walking the streets, from hooded menials to grey-skinned servitors and the tech adepts themselves, who are treated like royalty and carried through the city like sort of Roman dignitaries. However, they all have the same number sequence as Romu on their person somewhere. Eventually, they arrive at the home of Adept Zeph, which essentially looks like a palace from both the outside and from within. Decorated in white marble floors, enormous columns reaching so far that it actually hurts their neck to look to the top. And on the top of each, there is a huge decorated cog statue. The ceilings and walls are covered in golden mosaics with inscriptions and equations engraved in them. On one side, there's a wall of giant bronze doors standing open, and through the doors, a host of hooded figures led by Adept Coriel Zeph, described as tall, slender, and muscular, with a cloak of gold and red to her back. Her body is sheathed in the flexible skin of bronze armor, and she wears a studded head mask with opaque goggles to hide her face. And although all traces of her humanity were gone from the form of her body, she was clearly still a woman.
Yeah, I think the author got right into this bit.
Did he?
When you read it, when you listen to it, you're like, all right, steady on.
Was there a bit of like heavy breathing and a bit of a pause?
I could see as he was writing it, he might be like, oh yeah, like I was just like, all right, settle down. Like we you don't need to over labour the point. We get it. She's a woman.
Yeah, we didn't get too much more. Luckily, otherwise it would get a bit weird, wouldn't it? You have to slowly back away from the book.
It was very much getting close to that line.
He's like, oh no, we're not here for that. We're here for bolter porn.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. So when they finally get face to face, Zeph leans towards Dahlia, and with a hiss and a burst of static comes from her rebreather. Dahlia doesn't understand and says that she doesn't speak Liguria Technis. And with an audible click from within Zeph's head, she repeats and says, what relationship does the idle gas law represent? Standard greeting, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And Dahlia wasn't expecting this as a welcome to my home, but casts her mind for a memory and found the answer, which she learned in one of the first books she'd ever read. She manages to answer, and Zeph is very happy with that answer. She then introduces herself and welcomes her to the forge. Dahlia thanks her and says how impressive it was, and Zeph tells her that it took centuries of work, and even now it's not complete, and that is why she has brought her here. Dahlia is surprised and asks how Zeph even knows about her. And Zeph says, I know everything about you, and recites her place of birth, the names of her parents, her birthday down to the minute, which is currently 17 years, 3 months, 4 days, 6 hours, and 15 minutes. Impressed with this, she asks how she could possibly know this, and Zeph touches her cheek, where an Elect2 was implanted at her induction to the Librarium, which contains all of her data. And Zeph tells her that it's invisible to a human, but she's able to see it at all times. It's like a hologram, always on. And it is a new technology that Zeph has only recently mastered. Dahlia is impressed, but still not sure why she is here. And Zeph tells her it's because she has an understanding of machines and how they work. And this knowledge runs parallel with her own. The priests of Mars believe in continuing with the status quo and accepting the technology they have. Zeph wants to understand the hows and whys in order to improve on ancient works, which is frowned upon. And Dahlia has a skill which is valuable to her, but will cause fear to many others. Essentially, the priesthood enjoy having the rule of technology as it is. They have full control and understanding. But to keep this, they've stopped anyone from ever tinkering to improve everything. Hence why Dahlia was struck with a death sentence prior to being saved by Romu 31. Zeph believes that Dahlia will be the salvation of Mars when she helps perfect her greatest work. You'll have to pronounce this one. Akashic Reader.
That's not far off. The Akashic Reader is pretty much it.
I'll take that then.
Yeah, I think like hats off, nailed it.
I'm so proud of myself.
You should be.
Yeah. Right, so that's the end of chapter 2, and we found out why Dahlia has been brought to Mars, sort of.
Yes. Well, yeah, to a degree. Like,
yeah.
We know that she's there. Like, obviously, she's some random test on some physics law that maybe we were taught at one point in GCSE physics, but I definitely don't remember it.
No.
But definitely showcases Dahlia's sort of memory and ability to pull things forward and understanding why she's there. We get a little bit more about, we're introduced really to Coriel Zeph and the Forge Mistress, and how maybe a little bit more of an understanding in terms of how the forges are managed. So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops, because I suppose each forge is its own faction across Mars, and there's, as the book unveils, there's tensions between them all, but we'll come into that.
Yeah. So chapter 1.03. Now, going back to the map, we move from the Magna City to the northeast, far to the northeast, to a volcano called Ascracius Mons.
Yep.
Home to the oldest and most respected Titan order, the Legio Tempestus.
Yes.
And from his viewing gallery, Princess Indius Cavallero.
Indius Cavallero. Who is like Cavallero. I only know that because, as I said, I've been listening to it today. But Cavallero, who voice actor wise, just for those that do the audio book, is amazing, and so well worth listening to. Sounds exactly as his name would expect. Really, so Stormlord of the Legio Tempestus, obviously Tempestus, storm itself, thus taking the name Stormlord. So very, very narrative, but also there's a really, really cool character that really comes into more as this story unravels.
Yeah,
won't say any more until we get to it, but very cool character to keep an ear out for.
So right at this moment, he sort of sat in his own viewing gallery and watching emissaries from many of the other legions gathering for a meeting, which has been called the Council of Pharsis. Although many of the lords and masters arriving are talking and humouring each other, there's clearly a lot of tension between the orders, but this has been growing for years, creating division between them. Over a dozen orders are represented here, and the only one yet to arrive is the emissary from Mortis. Lord Commander Verticorda and his counterpart, Lord Commander Catarix, are standing in the centre of the room. Following Verticorda bending the knee to the God Emperor, it has been their job to act as princeps, conciliatus. I don't know. Basically, they're job sharing. I can't pronounce that word. It's ridiculous.
It's like the consigliere
Yeah.
which is in mafia terminology. They're like, but that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
This is what the knightly orders are. They're like the mafia, and they're all different families.
Yeah.
And these guys are basically the I say the negotiators, but they're like the official go-betweens between the Imperium and the Adeptus.
Mm. Yeah. So these two in particular, so like I say, they are job sharing. They work together. They also have to ensure that the council meetings are conducted with tradition and honour, and maintain unobjective debate. Towering over this assembly is the first god machine, Deus Tempestus, which has watched over these meetings for half a millennium, but has not actually moved in over 200 years. They are meeting following the recent incident which involved the Knights of Tyrannus, which actually could prove to make Verticorder's job harder. Although he's trusted to keep his temper, his much younger counterpart is currently pacing up and down and looking very unhappy. The Martian community is currently in shock at the news of the insult on Maximal's reactor, and he's still watching up in from his gallery. He runs his hand over his scalp, feels the implant plugs on his flesh, which allow him to command his war machines, and feels the metal as if it was his own skin. Looking out at the god machine, he's craving to get back into it. His one is called the Victorix Magna. At the minute, his uniform now hangs loosely from his body. He's becoming physically frail due to the extensive amount of time he spent hooked onto his Victorix, which means that when they're hooked together, they fight as one. He has been struggling to sleep, but when he does, he dreams of being back inside the machine and at war. Now he's on Mars with a small unit of battle titans for a refit after a lengthy campaign against the Greenskins, and are almost ready to rejoin their brothers who are fighting along with Lord Gilliman. In his mortal flesh, life is bland and disappointing, and although hooking up to a titan is painful, as if you're fighting a savage beast to compliance, once achieved, he feels like he's become a god. The separation process is worse than connection, as if the machine resents being switched off. The user suffers from headaches, sore bones, and other pains which degrade the body, which get worse after each separation. Eventually, he will be required to submerge permanently in an amniotic tank, which he's not looking forward to. Snapping out of his daydream, he sees movement in the hall below, two warriors in long, dark cloaks moving with purpose and striding towards the others. Legio Mortis has arrived. And the arguing begins.
It does. They start kicking off. There's always one in these family gatherings, and it's the one you would expect, Legio Mortis.
Yeah. Coming in dark cloaks, clearly not a good sign.
Skull faces, like all sorts of stuff emblazoned on them. You know, named after death. They're trouble.
Yeah. They shouldn't have invited them, really.
I they're there. They have to invite them, but again, I think other than their arrival, I think what's really interesting is the description of the need for like the knight or princeps generally, because they're princeps, I suppose.
Yeah.
To be with their machines, and like that fate that awaits them to end up in a amniotic sac because they can't physically be away from the machine anymore, which kind of mirrors in a very different way like the dreadnought, where a marine cannot continue and has to end up in an amniotic sac. This is more, this happens over a much longer period of time, but ends in the same way, that you're tethered to the machine forever, because there's some bond between the two that is unexplainable. This, as I said, the machine spirit, this weird concept that exists in the 41st millennium, or 40th, I suppose, depending on when this is, that doesn't exist in the same way that, well, I mean, there's no modern paradigm for it. You can't compare it to anything else. It's this weird religious kind of a religious bowing to a machine, and understanding like that feeling that this machine has a machine spirit. It can't be true, right? But you know, they're all into it, and that's it.
Oh yeah,
that's what drags them in, to the point where they're so addicted to it they can't stop doing it. And there are bits in the lore about it, like in other bits and pieces, about how the Titan pilots and people that go in and operate nights and stuff like that have to be careful about the amount of time they spend in the saddle, as it were.
Yeah.
Because they become addicted to it. And as he said, it, you know, the feeling of being a god, there is an addiction for these pilots, for these princeps, that, you know, that on the one hand they want to hold off for as long as possible, but on the other hand they get, you know, they want it, they get addicted to it, and they need to become part of it.
I bet once you go into that phase of being in the amniotic sac, you're probably not going to die, are you? Like, unless you get blown up.
I mean,
just live there.
Yeah, at that point, that's it. You're in until you're not. Like you're done then. Like you're not gonna. You're never gonna come out, but you're, you know, that's it. But you're effectively, your humanity or your life as a human is very different. If that makes sense. It's not the same anymore. I suppose it's a difference if you compare it. Again, we're going back to dreadnoughts, but like where dreadnoughts, they effectively, you know, after the battle's done, they turn you off. Like they put you back into hibernation because they want to make you last as long as possible. That's the sort of thing that's going to happen here, because you're no longer, you know, doesn't matter if you're not going to come out, walk around, have a cup of tea.
Well, that's it.
That's it, you're done.
Yeah. What does a Titan do when he's not at war?
Exactly.
Goes on holiday. Yeah. Yeah. Not fun, but
no.
Is it a trade-off for the life they get to lead?
I think it's because they get addicted to it, right? So that's the thing. It's that addiction. It's not. It's not healthy.
No.
But it doesn't matter because they're addicted to it. Yeah.
I think the only visual example I think I've seen is in the YouTube thing, Armageddon, the Titan that Grimaldus teams up with. She's the princess in that. She's in that form, isn't she?
Yeah.
You only see her through hologram.
The Hell's Reach one.
Yeah, Hell's Reach. That's the one.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah, she's the princeps of one of the god machines on Armageddon. Yeah, quite right. And yeah, that's it. That's her life. She is so tethered to the machine that there is no that where one ends and the other starts doesn't exist anymore. They are the same.
She is it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Don't take your work home with you.
That's what I mean. You've got to have some downtime at some point, right?
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so like we said, they're all arguing. Immediately, Catarix has started accusing the Lords of Mortis for the attack on the reactor. He's seething because they've put the lives of the Knights of Tyrannus at risk, which Princess Camulos immediately denies. The fact that the reactor now being gone made them the most profitable legio in the region, made them prime suspects, but there's just not the proof to point the finger at them. Vertical Order withdraws the question to the shock of Catarix and says that this is not a trial, but a council to discuss how these events can be avoided in the future. All three knights had survived, but suffered significant damage. Evidence suggests that Mortis are responsible, as the attack has their signature, being swift, brutal, and leaving no survivors, bar the three knights. Only one of the knights has actually seen the attacker, but all camera footage was lost. Camulos asks what reason Mortis was have for committing such an attack anyway. Aren't we all servants of the War Master? Caballero, who has watched silently until now, stands and says, "Don't you mean the Emperor's servants?"
Yeah.
To which Camelos retorts, the War Master is the Emperor's proxy, and they are one and the same, which is heavily disagreed with. And the two argue back and forth, with Caballero stating that although the War Master is commanding the Great Crusade, every man, woman, and machine is still a servant of the Emperor. And although he's a fine warrior, it would be a poor mistake to believe the forces belong solely to the War Master. It is well known that Mortis have supplied a good deal of power to the 63rd expedition. Some believe this to be quite dangerous. Camelos snaps back that the Emperor is too busy to fight and is hiding in a dungeon on Terra, and the War Master is finishing the good work. How can aligning with him be dangerous? Caballero says that this is just one more issue, which is causing divides between the Legios of Mars, and this is all over a semantic differing of opinion. The various adepts are forever sending requests to the Titan legions, asking them to walk on their behalf, and it always boils down to a difference of opinion or a suggested insult. He refuses to go to war because of difference of opinion, or because of the beliefs of religious madmen. So spitting sort of insults at each other now. They're turning to the other masters and lords. Caballero reminds them that the Legios have always been the defenders of Mars and stood beyond the petty squabbles of the Mechanicum, and they need to keep their heads. Camelos is openly up for war, quoting Alfarius, who has before said that war is the galaxy cleansing itself. The fire of the forge of Mars burns hottest when it burns away its impurities. If blood must be shed to preserve the glory of Mars, then so be it. Kelber Hall is awaiting emissaries from the War Master as they speak. And further to that, 2 Forge Masters have already pledged their loyalties to the War Master. Caballero is shocked, accusing him of open rebellion and in turn shocking the others. Camelos calls him a fool and tells him there had been plans in motion from the first day the Emperor set foot on Mars. Verticorda interjects, calling it treachery, causing an uproar in the house until Camelos shouts over them, telling them they have been slaves to Terra for too long, shackled to the demands of the Imperium with promises to bring glory to Mars that they have not kept. They can no longer remain neutral, and they must choose a side and choose the right side. So, out in the open now.
Yeah, out there.
Skullface has shown his true colours, I guess.
Yeah, they've come out, they've said it, and that's it.
And everyone's so surprised the guys in skulls and black cloaks are up for a bit of war, internal war.
Like, who would have thought it, eh? Like, you know, I mean, they've not given out any signs that might be the case.
No. But yeah, I mean, that's obviously going to push us into that sort of direction for the rest of the book. So now we're going to see, obviously, all these different Titan legions and Forge Masters falling out of each other and picking a side. So we sort of know where this is heading.
Indeed, yeah, it's going that way.
Yeah. So people that don't know what's quite going on at the minute, we're back with Dahlia. She's already been put to work quickly, and she's been put on a team of other skilled individuals. We have Melisine Oster, a technical overseer, a tall, good-looking woman with brown skin from the American continent, with a metal faceplate on one side of her face. Zuch Chahaya, a machinist from the Indocenic block. Indocenic block, who is about 1 meter tall. Severin Delmer, she's a schematic drafter, power-skinned with the look of a strict head teacher. And Caxton Torgay, a guy about the same age as Dahlia and seems generally happy to meet her. That's about all the description you get.
It is early on, yeah.
He's just happy to see her.
Very pleased to see her.
Yeah. So these guys are working on getting a machine built, but they haven't been having much luck. They've been given schematics which are thousands of years old and have been transcribed numerous times by other adepts through the years. And they have been given 7 rotations to make a working prototype of a machine called a Theta Wave Enhancer. So Dahlia is determined to decipher the plans, but her fellows have become defeatist. Normally, she's been able to ignore them, but after a few days, they've started to get to her. So she sort of takes a minute to close her eyes and imagines herself looking at the oceans of Lorraine. She's never been, but she's transcribed the works of a poet named Edwimore about a year ago, and those images have calmed her. Now, we never met Edwimore, but we know what's happened to him.
He's had a bad time of it.
Yeah, definitely. He's either been brutally killed or turned into something nasty and then brutally killed. Or he's currently being worn as decoration on a space marine somewhere.
There's no way that it's come out good for him, right?
No, not at all. Yeah, there's no time to feel sorry for him.
No.
But yeah, so hopefully you know what we're talking about. If not, go read Fulgrim or watch our review of Fulgrim.
Watch our review and then read it.
Yeah, definitely in that order. So, going back to the story, it took them a day to decide what this machine would even be once completed. Dahlia managed to work it out, at least estimating that it is a device to enhance the functionality of the brain, allowing a person to tap into areas they could not previously, increasing the ability to learn and to retain information. Watching them on a hollow screen, Zeph and Maximal are off in another room, and Maximal asks Zeph if she thinks that Dahlia can actually do this. Zeph believes that she can, based on the alteration she made to the device back on Terra, and believes that she has an unconscious connection to the Akasha, which is encoded in the substance of the Aether. And Maximal says, by Aether, sorry.
Aether, yeah.
Do you mean the warp? And Zeph says yes, but don't call it that. The warp has a danger associated to it and doesn't want to be linked to meddling with the warp before she's clear on what they're actually dealing with. If they succeed, they can access the Akashic records and use the Great Reader to uncover the source of all knowledge. They will be able to use their empath to decode the reader, and they will know everything. Maximal is initially disturbed at the thought of using a psyker and asks why they can't just use Dahlia. Yep. Zeph says that she's one of a kind, and exposure to the ether burns out empaths, and they don't want to lose her. And Maximal says that they're onto a great piece of work, but there are those who seek to put a stop to it, such as the Fabricator General and his cronies, and warns Zeph that she's not making friends with that open scorn towards Kilgore Howe. He's already had one of his refineries destroyed because of it, and although the Council of Phrasis believe Legio Mortis are responsible, they've denied the attack. But Maximal actually believes that Mortis are not responsible, and he suspects the Fabricator General. Although he knows they are involved in some way, he actually believes that Lucas Crom, the Forge Master of Mondus Gamma, is a real culprit. Rumours have it that he created a great machine that may even be sentient. Reports are that the machine was destroyed in the refinery attack, but he suspects it escaped and is hiding. But they could search for 100 years and not be able to find it, as all the information about it has gone dark. But a name has been linked to it, Kaban, which translates to Kabar, which in turn can only be traced to an ancient Egyptian word of Horus, the god of the sky, and of course the god of war. The link doesn't make sense to either of them, as they can't understand why the Fabricator General would build such a machine for Horus as opposed to the Emperor. The only thing out of the ordinary they can think of is that Regulus has just returned from the 63rd expedition and is heading for the Forge Master on Mars. Maximal doesn't see anything wrong with that until Zeph points out that when was the last time an emissary from the fleets reported to Mars before the Sigillite of Terror?
Yep.
So ending chapter 3 and part 1 of our review.
There's a lot of stuff going on, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff being set up. There's a lot of bits and pieces at play. A little bit of intrigue, a little bit of infighting across the night houses, as well as stuff that's going on in the forges and the forge masters and the forge mistress. The interpolitics of Mars, all at play. And it's interesting, even though Dahlia is our protagonist, our eyes. She's only been about a third of it.
Yeah.
We haven't spent that much time with her. It's been bouncing around across all of them, and I think that's to come with this book, is it does bounce around a little bit between various different storylines, to the point where, you know, it can, on a first view or first read through, it can be a bit confusing in that regard, because you are following three very separate storylines that could in theory have been their own books, but that being said, it's, as I said, as much as it is a change of pace and a change of direction, it is very intriguing.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the first, or what we've covered so far, is what sets us up for that. It's the intrigue that we're set up for.
Yeah, and especially like so you got Zeph talking to Maximal, and they're already sort of plotting and scheming because they know that people are plotting and scheming worse things. Then we've got the council that have all kicked off and declaring sides and shouting traitor at each other. And then you've got like the knights who got caught up in the middle of it, who are now back at, obviously, a bit more central. So yeah, it's like, what's going on? Why are everyone claiming for Horus? No one knows what's going on yet.
Yeah, where did that come from? A lot of people are like, well, hang on, what? Because the other thing that you forget is that while all of this is happening, the Great Crusade is still happening.
Yeah.
Like this is you know, all of the people that are on Mars right now are people that are not on the Crusade. The Crusade is still happening, and these knightly houses, their god machines are out. They're committed. They're in the field. Yeah. So it's happening right now. Like I can't remember the name of it.
You got the Furious Abyss is still being built.
Furious Abyss is still being built, but on Istvan, there's a Titan on Istvan.
Yeah, the wasn't that the Arius, something like that?
Yeah, I can't remember.
I can tell you. Bear with me. We'll find out.
I believe it's from the House of Mortis.
Yeah, it is.
I believe it is a Mortis engine, and so all of these bits are connected, but you just don't realise how connected until you start reading these stories.
There's a Ray.
Yeah, of course. There you go.
That's it. That's the one.
But yes, on Istvan, probably as this is happening, ready to do the dirty.
Yeah, it's all tying together.
Indeed, it is. So it as I said, this one, as I said, the thing that I would say most about it is it's setting up intrigue, and of course, we get a little hint of Kelvor Howl and Regulus, who you know are the Mechanicum versions of I don't know, Erebus and Lorgar.
Yeah, and we obviously, like, briefly right at the beginning of Furious Abyss, he was the one waving it off and then blowing all these people up. Just
launched a bottle of champagne on the side of it. and then blew everyone up.
Yeah, so good intro, I think. Like, especially sort of picking it apart and reading it the second time, it makes sense. Like, I'm looking forward to going through the rest of this book. Yeah,
as I said, I was where we've been doing the reviews. I kind of listened to them just before we do it, so I listened to the first 4 chapters today. I didn't want to stop. Like it's interesting. The first time around felt like hard going. This time around, I was like, no, I want to keep listening. I want to see what happens next. Obviously, maybe because part of me remembers it, but there's a lot of good stuff in this, so I'm looking forward to it.
That's it. Yeah, this was definitely one when it ended. I was like, I'm gutted, but I'm glad that we're doing this because it's an excuse to go through it again.
Yeah, indeed.
Absolutely. And I say, obviously, if you're watching this, the reviews will be out obviously every couple of weeks. So go read the book and come back.
Yeah.
And then do it all again with us.
Absolutely.
Cool. So let's say goodbye then, and we'll see you on the next one. Obviously, we're aware that these are quite long, but Iron and Sarah might give us a Google, social media. obviously, the one thing we do like is when you put your posts up, if you are into the hobby, use Iron and Ceramite, and then we'll share it on ours as well, just to try and share the hobby love, so to speak. Come see us on Facebook and talk to us on there. Twitter, obviously, if you're listening to us on podcast, thank you. But do come check out our YouTube, because there's other things on there, and our first battle report will be up now, so go and watch that. Yep. Me and Shane, Death Guard and Necrons, go see how that goes. If you're watching on YouTube, then and you want to listen on the move, podcast for you. We're on Twitch. Come watch me play some games on there badly. If you want to support the channel, there's 2 ways to do that. Come find us on Patreon, or you can use our link to Element Games when you're buying your hobby supplies or your books. Use our code that's in the description. You'll still get your normal Element Games discount. And as a thank you, we sort of get a kickback when so much money is spent using our link. Yep. Any money we do make will go to improve the quality of our videos. Like I say, go check out the battle report. We want to do more of those, and obviously improve the quality as we go along. And finally, combat cards. If you play that, download the app and join our clan. Iron and Ceramite play against. I think you and Glenn are the only ones playing it, to be fair, mate.
I think we're the only two that are. Well, I mean, there's other people. Obviously, there's other people in the clan. It's out of us on Iron and Ceramite. I think it's just me and Glenn that keep it going. As I said, mine through a burning ambition to try and beat Glenn. Glenn's through a ambition just to always make sure his dominance is asserted as we get towards the end of the month. But obviously, everyone else, welcome aboard. Come and see how you can stack up on the leaderboard. Mm-hmm. As I said, we're there playing it pretty much every month at the moment.
Yeah, cool. Right, I do need to get back into it, but I've got a book to read, so I won't be doing it today. But thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.
As always, we would like to thank you for listening to our Iron and Ceramite podcast. If you liked us, then you can also find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and any other good podcast services. Just remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.